Jake Martinez pulled his worn violin case closer to his chest as another transport ship roared overhead. The sound made everyone on the street look up with tired, worried eyes. Another group of people leaving Earth forever. Another reminder that time was running out. The 19-year-old musician found his usual spot outside the central transit hub. The concrete was cracked and dirty, but the acoustics were perfect. Sound bounced off the tall buildings around him, carrying his music to every corner of the busy square. Today, like every day for the past month, hundreds of people rushed past him with their bags and children. Heading to the evacuation ship, Jake opened his case and took out his violin. The instrument was old, made by his grandfather before Jake was even born. The wood had a strange, dark color that seemed to shift in the light. Sometimes it looked brown, sometimes almost black, and occasionally it seemed to glow with tiny flecks of silver. His grandfather had told him it was made from special wood, but Jake never knew what made it so different. He placed the violin under his chin and drew the bow across the strings. The first notes of Faded filled the air, soft and haunting. It was a song that seemed perfect for these last days on Earth. Everything was fading away, the blue skies, the green forest, even hope itself. People began to slow down as they heard the music. A mother carrying a sleeping baby paused and closed her eyes. An old man with a walking stick stopped and leaned against a nearby wall. Even the children stopped pulling on their parents' hands and listened. The violin sang of loss and longing, of memories that would soon be nothing but echoes. Jake had been playing on these streets for 3 years, ever since his parents died in the scorching wars. Music was all he had left, and it was all he could give to these frightened people. His violin case was open in front of him, but he wasn't playing for money anymore. Credits wouldn't matter where they were all going as he played. More people gathered around him. The crowd grew larger than it had ever been. Factory workers still, covered in dust from their last shifts. Office workers clutching briefcases they would probably never need again. Families with everything they owned packed into small bags. They all stood together, listening to the violin cry out the sadness they couldn't put into words. Dr. Lisa Stone was rushing toward Transport Bay 7 when the music stopped her in her tracks. She was a xenorchaeologist, a scientist who studied alien artifacts, and she was supposed to be on the next ship to the new colony world. Her research was too important to leave behind, the authorities had said. But as she heard the violin, something made her pause. The sound was wrong. Not wrong in a bad way, but wrong in a way that made her scientist's mind start asking questions. She had spent years studying alien materials and their properties. She knew the sound that different materials made when they vibrated. This violin didn't sound like wood. It sounded like something else entirely. Lisa pushed through the crowd until she could see the young musician clearly. He was thin and pale, with dark hair that looked like it hadn't been cut in months. His clothes were clean but patched in several places. But it was his violin that caught her attention. Even from several feet away, she could see that the instrument wasn't made from normal wood. The surface had tiny crystals embedded in it, so small that most people would never notice them. But Lisa had seen crystals like that before, in fragments of meteorites that had been proven to come from outside the solar system. She had never seen so many of them in one place, and certainly never seen them used to make a musical instrument. Jake finished the song and the crowd began to break up. Some people dropped coins into his case, others just nodded their thanks. A few wiped tears from their eyes. The music had given them a moment of peace in the chaos of evacuation. Lisa waited until most of the crowd was gone, then approached Jake. "That was beautiful," she said. "Your violin has an unusual sound." Jake looked up at her. She was probably in her 30s, with short brown hair and intelligent eyes. She wore the kind of practical clothes that scientists preferred, with lots of pockets for tools and equipment. "Thank you," he said simply. "It was my grandfather's. May I ask where he got it?" Lisa tried to keep her voice casual, but her heart was beating faster. If her suspicions were correct, This instrument could be incredibly important. He made it himself, Jake said, carefully placing the violin back in its case. He was a carpenter. Before the wars. He said he used wood from a tree that grew near a meteorite crater on our family farm. Lisa felt her breath catch. A meteorite crater? Yeah, my grandfather said a space rock crashed there when he was young. The tree that grew over it had strange wood, different from all the other trees. He saved a piece when lightning struck it down, and years later, he made this violin from it. Lisa's mind was racing. Meteorites sometimes contain materials that didn't exist naturally on Earth. If this violin was made from wood that had absorbed alien materials, it could explain the unusual sound and appearance. More importantly, it might contain substances that could be vital to humanity's survival on their new world. Jake, she said carefully, I'm Dr. Lisa Stone. I'm a scientist, and I study materials from space. I think your violin might be very special, very important. Jake frowned. Important how? Before Lisa could answer, a loud announcement echoed across the square. Final boarding call for Transport 7. All passengers must board immediately. This is the last evacuation ship from New Angeles. Lisa looked toward the transport bay, then back at Jake. Are you registered for evacuation? Jake shook his head. I don't have family off-world. I don't have the credits for passage. I figured I'd stay here until... You didn't finish the sentence. They both knew what would happen to anyone who stayed on Earth. Lisa made a decision that would change both. There lives. Come with me, she said. I have priority passage because of my research. I can get you on my ship. Why would you do that? Jake asked. Lisa looked at the violin case in his hands. Because I think that instrument of yours might be the key to something important. Something that could help all of us survive what's coming. Jake looked around the empty square. The last few stragglers were running toward the transport bays. Soon, this place would be silent forever. His grandfather's violin had been his only companion for so long. But maybe it was meant for something bigger than street performances. Okay, he said. Let's go. They ran toward Transport Bay 7 together, Lisa's scientific equipment bag bouncing on her shoulder, Jake clutching his violin case tightly. Behind them, the empty streets of New Angeles waited for the end of the world. Ahead of them, a ship, full of humanity's survivors prepared to carry them to the stars. Neither of them knew that Jake's violin would soon awaken something ancient and powerful in the depths of space. Neither of them knew that the strange crystals in the instrument were already beginning to resonate with forces beyond human understanding. All they knew was that they were leaving Earth together, carrying with them a piece of music that would soon become the voice of humanity among the stars. The colony ship New Horizons had been traveling through deep space for 3 months when Jake first saw the thing that would change everything. He was in the observation deck, the same place he went every evening to practice his violin. The large windows showed nothing but stars and the endless darkness between them. But Jake found the view peaceful. Most of the other passengers had stopped coming to watch the stars weeks ago. Space looked the same every day, and it reminded too many people of what they had lost. But Jake liked the quiet. It was the only place on the ship where he could play his violin without disturbing anyone. He had just started playing, faded, when Lisa Stone rushed into the observation deck. Her face was pale and excited. "Jake, you need to stop playing and come see this," she said. "What's wrong?" Jake lowered his violin but didn't put it away. "Nothing's wrong." "Something's right. Very right." Lisa grabbed his arm and pulled him toward the main viewing window. "Look out there. Do you see anything different?" Jake looked where she was pointing. At first, he saw only the usual stars. Then he noticed something that made his heart skip. Far in the distance, barely visible against the black of space, something was glowing. It wasn't a star. It was too big and the wrong shape. It looked almost like a city made of light. "What is that?" Jake asked. "We don't know yet. The ship's sensors picked it up about an hour ago. Captain Clark thinks it might be some kind of space station, but it's not like anything humans have ever built. The really strange part is what happened when you started playing. Lisa pulled out a small device that showed dancing lines of light. This measures energy readings from that object. Watch what happens when you play your violin again. Jake raised his instrument and began to play. The moment the first note sounded, the lines on Lisa's device went wild. The glowing object in the distance seemed to pulse in rhythm with the music. It's responding to your violin, Lisa said, her voice full of wonder. The energy output increases every time you play a note. It's like that thing out there is listening to you. Captain Ben Clark's voice came over the ship's speakers. All passengers, please remain calm. We are approaching an unknown structure. This is likely our first contact with alien technology. Dr. Stone, please report to the bridge immediately. Lisa looked at Jake. Come with me. I think the captain needs to hear about this connection between your violin and that object. They made their way through the ship's narrow corridors. The New Horizons carried almost 10,000 people, refugees from Earth who were hoping to start new lives on a distant planet. Most of them were in their sleeping quarters or the common areas, talking quietly about what the strange object might mean. The bridge was busy with activity. Captain Clark stood in the center, looking at screens that showed the mysterious structure from different angles. He was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. The responsibility of keeping so many people safe had aged him during their journey. Dr. Stone, he said when Lisa and Jake arrived. What can you tell me about that thing? It's definitely not natural, Lisa said. The materials it's made from don't match anything in our databases. But the most important discovery is this. She gestured toward Jake. When Jake plays his violin, the structure responds. It's like the music activates something inside it. Captain Clark looked at Jake with new interest. You're the musician from the transit hub. I remember seeing you bored at the last minute. Yes, sir, Jake said quietly. Play something now, the captain ordered. I want to see this response for myself. Jake felt nervous with everyone on the bridge watching him, but he raised his violin and began to play. Through the main viewing screen, they could all see the alien structure begin to glow brighter. Lights moved across its surface in patterns that almost looked like musical notes made of energy. Chief Engineer Amy Ross spoke up from her station. Captain, the structure is definitely responding to the music. I'm reading massive power increases throughout the object. Whatever it is, it was dormant until now. How is that possible? Captain Clark asked. How can a human musical instrument affect alien technology? Lisa had been thinking about that question for the past hour. Jake, tell the captain about your violin, about how your grandfather made it. Jake explained about the meteorite crater and the tree that grew over it. He told them how his grandfather had used the strange wood to make the violin and how it had always sounded different from other instruments. As Jake spoke, Lisa was putting together a theory. Captain, I think Jake's violin contains materials that originally came from that structure out there. If a piece of it crashed on Earth years ago, and if Jake's grandfather used that material to make the violin, then the instrument and the structure might be connected somehow. Amy Ross looked up from her controls. That would explain the energy resonance. The violin might be like a key that unlocks the structure's systems. Captain Clark stared at the glowing object on the screen. It was getting larger as their ship moved closer. Now they could see that it was enormous, easily the size of a small moon. Its surface was covered with geometric patterns that pulsed with soft light. Sir, one of the navigation officers called out. The structure is changing course. It's moving toward us. Everyone on the bridge tensed. A structure that large could easily destroy their ship if it wanted to. But as it approached, the lights on its surface seemed to pulse in a welcoming pattern. It's not threatening us, Lisa said. I think it's trying to communicate. Jake felt something strange happening to his violin. The tiny crystals in the wood were beginning to glow, so faintly that only he could see it. The instrument felt warm. In his hands, almost alive. I think it wants me to keep playing, Jake said. Then play, Captain Clark ordered. But be ready to stop if anything goes wrong. Jake began to play a slow, gentle melody. As the music filled the bridge, the alien structure responded by creating its own light patterns. The patterns weren't random. They seemed to follow the rhythm and melody of Foley. Jake's violin. Amy Ross was monitoring the structure's energy output. Captain, I think we're witnessing a form of communication. The structure is creating harmonic frequencies that match Jake's music. It's like they're having a musical conversation. For the next hour, Jake played while the alien structure responded with its own light symphony. Gradually, a pattern emerged. The structure would echo Jake's melodies, then add its own variations. It was teaching him new musical phrases and learning from the ones he played. Lisa was recording everything on her instruments. "This is incredible," she whispered. "We're witnessing the first musical communication between humans and an alien." Intelligence. As Jake continued to play, he began to understand something that he couldn't quite put into words. The structure wasn't just responding to his music, it was sharing its own songs. Songs that had been waiting in the darkness of space for someone to hear them. The violin in his hands felt different now, more complete somehow. The crystals embedded in the wood were glowing brighter, and Jake could feel energy flowing between his instrument and the massive structure outside. "Captain," Amy Ross said suddenly, "the structure is opening. There's a docking bay forming on its surface. I think it's inviting us inside." Captain Clark looked at the alien structure, then at Jake and his glowing violin. They had left Earth to find a new home among the stars. Instead, they have found something that might be even more important, a connection between human music and an intelligence that had been waiting in the void for someone to wake it up. "Prepare a shuttle," the captain said. "We're going to accept their invitation." Jake carefully placed his violin back in its case, but the glow from the crystals didn't fade. Whatever was inside that alien structure, his grandfather's violin was the key to understanding it. The street musician from Earth was about to become humanity's first ambassador to an ancient civilization that spoke only in songs. The shuttle carrying Jake, Lisa, Captain Clark, and 4 other crew members approached the alien structure's docking bay. Jake held his violin case tightly on his lap, feeling the crystals inside pulse with gentle warmth. The massive structure filled their entire view through the shuttle's windows, its surface covered with patterns that shifted and flowed like living music made of light. "Landing successful," announced pilot Steve Green as the shuttle touched down inside the alien bay. "Atmosphere is breathable. Temperature is comfortable. Whatever built this place wanted visitors to survive." Captain Clark stood up and checked his equipment. "Remember, we don't know what we're dealing with. Stay together, document everything, and if I give the order to retreat, we leave immediately." They stepped out of the shuttle into a space that took their breath away. The docking bay was enormous, easily large enough to hold a dozen ships the size of the New Horizons. But it was the walls that made everyone stare in wonder. They were covered with what looked like musical instruments from 1,000 different worlds, all built into the structure itself. Lisa pulled out her scanner and began taking readings. "The materials here are unlike anything in our databases. They're not metal or stone or any substance we know. It's almost like the walls are grown rather than built." Jake felt his violin case vibrating gently. He opened it and saw that the crystals in his instrument were glowing brighter than ever before. "I think it wants me to play," he said. "Go ahead," Captain Clark said. "But carefully." Jake took out his violin and played a single clear note. The moment the sound filled the air, the entire chamber responded. Lights flowed along the walls like rivers of music, and the alien instruments began to hum with harmonious tones. A doorway opened in the far wall, revealing a corridor that glowed with warm, welcoming light. "It's showing us the way," Lisa said, watching her instruments record the energy patterns. "The structure is guiding us deeper inside." They walked through corridors that seemed to stretch on forever. The walls were lined with more instruments, some that looked almost familiar, others that were completely alien. All of them hummed softly as Jake passed, as if his violin was waking them from a long sleep. After what felt like hours of walking, they emerged into a vast chamber that made them all stop and stare. It was like being inside a giant musical instrument. The ceiling curved high above them, covered with strings that stretched from wall to wall like the inside of a massive harp. Crystals of every color hung from the strings, creating a rainbow of light that danced with every breath of air. In the center of the chamber stood a platform with what looked like a podium or conductor's stand. As they approached it, Jake felt his violin pulling toward the platform, as if drawn by invisible strings. "This is incredible," Lisa whispered, her voice echoing strangely in the vast space. "This entire structure is one giant musical instrument. But what's it for?" Before anyone could answer, the air in front of the platform began to shimmer. A figure made of light and sound appeared, translucent and beautiful. It looked somewhat human, but taller and more graceful, with features that seemed to shift like music itself. "Welcome, young musician," the figure said, its voice like a symphony of wind chimes. "I am Echo 7, guardian of the conservatory. I have been waiting for one who carries the resonance." Jake stepped forward, his violin still in his hands. "The resonance?" "Your instrument," Echo 7 said, gesturing toward Jake's violin. "It contains fragments of harmonian crystal, materials from our ancient home. We are the Harmonians, and this is our greatest creation, a library of all the music that has ever existed in the universe." Lisa moved closer, her scanner working frantically to record everything. "Harmonians? How long have you been here?" "Time has little meaning in the void," Echo 7 replied. "We have waited here for countless cycles, preserving the songs of a million worlds. But we could not maintain the conservatory alone. We needed someone who could connect with our crystals, someone who could conduct the great symphony of preservation." "Captain," Clark stepped forward, "what happened to your people? Where are the Harmonians now?" Echo 7's form flickered with sadness. "We faced a great enemy, a force that devours all sound and music from the universe. We call it the Silence. It consumed our homeworld and scattered our people across the stars. Some of us escaped in crystal form, embedded in meteors that we launched into space, hoping that someday someone would find them and learn to use their power." Jake looked down at his violin with new understanding. "My grandfather's tree grew over one of your crystals." "Yes," Echo 7 said. "The crystal influenced the tree's growth, changing its wood to become a conductor for harmonian frequencies. When your grandfather crafted it into an instrument, he unknowingly created a key to our technology." Lisa was putting together the pieces. "That's why Jake's music activated the conservatory. His violin can interface with your systems." "More than that," Echo 7 said. "With proper training, the young musician could access the knowledge of entire civilizations. Every song, every melody ever played, every rhythm ever danced to, all of it is stored here in harmonic frequencies." Jake felt overwhelmed. "But I'm just a street musician. I don't know anything about alien technology or cosmic music." Echo 7 moved closer, and Jake felt warmth radiating from the creature's light form. "Music is universal, young one. The ability to create harmony from chaos, to find beauty in sound. This is a gift that transcends species and worlds. You have this gift, and with it, you can help us preserve what remains." "What do you mean, what remains?" Captain Clark asked. Echo 7's form darkened. "The Silence has not been idle during our long wait. It has consumed countless worlds, destroying their music forever. Even now, it moves through space, hunting for sources of harmony to devour. It will find this place eventually, and when it does, all the music of the universe will die with us." Jake felt a chill of fear, but also something else, a sense of purpose he had never experienced before. "What can I do?" "Learn," Echo 7 said simply. "Connect with the conservatory through your violin. Let the music of the ancients flow through you. But be warned, each time you access our knowledge, it will drain your life force. The deeper you go into the harmonic records, the more it will cost you. Lisa grabbed Jake's arm. It's too dangerous. We can't let you risk your life. But Jake was already raising his violin to his chin. If this music dies, then every civilization that ever existed will be forgotten. Every song, every lullaby, every celebration, all of it will be gone forever. He drew his bow across the strings, and the conservatory came alive around them. The crystal strings above began to vibrate in harmony, creating music that was both alien and familiar. Jake felt knowledge flowing into his mind, songs from worlds he had never imagined, rhythms that spoke of joys and sorrows across the galaxy. Through the music, he saw flashes of the Harmonian civilization at its height. Beings of grace and beauty who had discovered that music was the fundamental force that held the universe together. They had built the conservatory as a sanctuary for all musical knowledge, believing that as long as songs existed, hope would never truly die. But he also saw the silence, a creeping darkness that consumed sound itself, leaving behind only empty void where once there had been music and life. It was moving through space, destroying everything in its path. And it was coming their way. Jake lowered his violin, breathing heavily. The knowledge he had gained was overwhelming, but he understood now what he had to do. He was no longer just a street musician playing for coins. He was the keeper of the universe's musical heritage, and he was the only one who could conduct the symphony that might save everything. "Echo 7," he said, his voice steady despite his fear. "Teach me everything. I need to know. We don't have much time." Jake had been learning from Echo 7 for 2 weeks when the first warning came. He was in the conservatory's main chamber, practicing with his violin while the ancient harmonian taught him to access the musical memories of dead civilizations. Each lesson left him tired but filled with incredible knowledge, songs that could heal, melodies that could move mountains, and rhythms that could make plants grow faster. The alarm sounded like a discordant note that made everyone cover their ears. Echo 7's light form flickered with fear as red warning lights filled the chamber. "What's happening?" Lisa asked, running her scanner frantically. "The silence," Echo 7 said, its voice trembling. "It has found us. It is still far away, but it approaches faster than we hoped." Captain Clark activated his communicator. "Clark to New Horizons. Report." The voice of Navigation Officer Pete Johnson crackled through the device. "Captain, we're detecting a massive energy disturbance moving toward our position. It's unlike anything we've ever seen. Space itself seems to be dying where it passes." Jake felt his violin strings vibrate with fear. Through his connection to the conservatory, he could sense the approaching danger. The silence wasn't just empty space, it was actively hostile, a force that hated all sound and vibration. It moved through the universe like a wave of destruction, leaving behind regions where even atoms stopped moving. "How long do we have?" Jake asked. Echo 7's form grew dimmer. "At its current speed, perhaps 3 of your days. But once it begins to feed on the conservatory's energy, it will grow stronger and faster." Lisa was studying her readings with growing alarm. "Jake, look at this. The silence isn't just destroying things randomly. It's following a pattern, moving from one source of music to another. It's been tracking the harmonic energy from your violin." The horrible truth hit Jake like a physical blow. "You mean I let it here? My playing brought this thing to the conservatory?" "No. Young musician," Echo 7 said gently. "The silence would have found us eventually. Your arrival simply accelerated the inevitable. But your presence also gives us something we have never had before: hope." Captain Clark was coordinating with his ship. "Pete, I need you to send a message to any other human ships in the area. Tell them to stay away from our position. And contact Chief Engineer Amy Ross. I need to know if our ship can outrun that thing." Pete's voice came back quickly. "Sir, Engineer Ross says the New Horizons can't move fast enough to escape." But she's got an idea about using the ship's engines to create harmonic interference. Echo 7 suddenly became more solid, its attention focused on something Jake couldn't see. Your engineer understands sound principles. Yes, harmonic interference could slow the silence, but it will require precise frequency control. Jake felt a spark of hope. Can you teach me those frequencies? If I can play them on my violin, maybe I can help Amy coordinate the interference. It is possible, Echo 7 said, but such music is dangerous. The frequencies needed to fight the silence are the same ones that hold matter together. One wrong note could destroy your ship instead of protecting it. Over the next day, Jake worked frantically to learn the protective harmonies. Echo 7 showed him how certain combinations of notes could create barriers of sound that the silence couldn't penetrate. But each lesson was more exhausting than the last. Jake's hair was turning gray at the temples, and he had lost weight. The knowledge he was gaining was literally aging him. Lisa watched him practice with growing concern. Jake, you need to rest. This is killing you. If I rest, everyone dies, Jake replied, not stopping his playing. The silence will destroy the conservatory, then hunt down every other source of music in the universe. Every lullaby, every love song, every celebration dance, all of it will disappear forever. Meanwhile, Amy Ross had been working with the New Horizons engines, trying to turn them into giant speakers. She had contacted Jake through the ship's communication system several times, asking for specific frequency information that only he could provide through his connection to the conservatory on. The second day, Jake made a discovery that changed everything. While exploring the deepest musical memories in the conservatory, he found records of other species that had fought the silence. Most had failed, but a few had discovered something important. Humans had a unique ability that no other known species possessed. Echo 7, Jake called out excitedly. I found something in the archives. There are records here of other species that tried to fight the silence, but it says humans are different. The Harmonian Guardian materialized beside him. What did you discover? According to these records, most species need technology to create complex music. But humans make music instinctively, without any tools at all. We hum while we work. We sing in the shower. We tap rhythms with our fingers without even thinking about it. Echo 7's form brightened with understanding. Yes, this is why your species was chosen. Humans create harmony naturally. Given proper training, they could become living instruments, each one capable of generating protective frequencies. Jake turned to Lisa and Captain Clark, who had been listening with growing excitement. We need to get back to the ship. If I can teach some of the crew to generate these protective frequencies with their voices, we might be able to create a barrier strong enough to hold off the silence. They rushed back to the New Horizons, where Jake immediately began working with volunteers from the crew. He started with people who already had musical experience, the ship's entertainment coordinator, a few people who sang in the informal choir, and even some children who had been taking music lessons before the evacuation from Earth. Pete Johnson, the navigation officer, turned out to have a natural talent for harmony. Security Chief Kate Turner could generate bass frequencies that made the ship's hull vibrate. Even Captain Clark, despite claiming he couldn't carry a tune, managed to produce protective overtones when Jake guided him. But as Jake taught them, he could feel the silence getting closer. Through his connection to the conservatory, he sensed its approach like a growing headache. Space itself was becoming quieter as the destructive force consumed the teeth. Background hum of cosmic radiation. Amy Ross contacted the group from the engine room. Jake, I've got the engines tuned to the frequencies you gave me, but I need to know exactly when to activate them. Can you sense when the silence will arrive? Jake closed his eyes and reached out with his violin-enhanced senses. What he felt made his blood run cold. It's not just approaching, he said quietly. It's already here. It's surrounding us, studying the conservatory before it attacks. Through the ship's viewports, they could see the effect. The stars were going out one by one, not because they were being destroyed, but because the light itself was being absorbed into the growing sphere of absolute nothingness that surrounded them. The silence had found them, and now Jake and his small group of human musicians were the only thing standing between it and the complete destruction of all music in the universe. Jake raised his violin, feeling the weight of countless civilizations' musical heritage in his hands. Everyone ready? He asked his makeshift orchestra of refugees and crew members. They nodded, fear and determination mixing in their faces. Outside, the last stars were disappearing into the advancing wall of nothingness. The final battle for the soul of the universe was about to begin, and it would be fought not with weapons, but with the simple human ability to make beautiful sounds in the face of overwhelming darkness. The silence struck without warning. Jake was teaching Security Chief Kate Turner a protective harmony when the walls of the New Horizons began to vibrate strangely. Not the good kind of vibration that came from music, but something wrong and frightening that made everyone's teeth hurt. "It's starting," Echo 7's voice came through the ship's speakers. The Harmonian had linked itself to the ship's communication system to coordinate their defense. "The silence is testing our barriers. Jake, you must begin the symphony now." Jake raised his violin, his hand shaking slightly. Through the ship's windows, he could see the conservatory in the distance. Parts of it were already growing dark as the silence consumed the energy that kept its ancient systems alive. If they failed here, millions of years of musical history would disappear forever. "Everyone remember what we practice," Jake called out to his small group of musicians. "Pete, you start with the bass foundation. Kate, wait for my signal for the harmony line. Captain Clark, when I nod to you, begin the protection chant." Jake drew his bow across the violin strings. The first notes of their resistance symphony filled the air, and immediately the strange vibrations in the ship's walls stopped. The protective frequencies were working, creating a bubble of musical energy around the New Horizons that the silence couldn't penetrate. But Jake could sense it wasn't enough. The silence was vast and patient. It would probe their defenses, find weaknesses, and eventually break through. They needed more power, more voices, more music. Captain Clark was listening to reports from other ships through his earpiece. "Jake, we're getting responses to our distress call. 3 more colony ships are in range and moving to our position. The Titan's Hope, the Star Pioneer, and the Freedom's Dream." "Are they crazy?" Kate Turner asked while maintaining her harmony. "They should be running away from this thing, not coming toward it. They're coming to help," Jake realized. "If we can coordinate all 4 ships, we might have enough musical power to fight back." Amy Ross's voice came through the speakers from the engine room. "Jake, I'm reading massive energy fluctuations from the conservatory. It's like the whole structure is singing, but the song is getting weaker." Through his connection to Echo 7, Jake could feel what was happening. The conservatory was fighting back, using its stored musical energy to resist the silence. But every moment of resistance cost it irreplaceable songs and melodies. Ancient lullabies were being consumed. Victory march from long-dead civilizations were disappearing. Love songs that had survived for millions of years were being silenced forever. "Echo 7?" Jake called out. "How much time do we have before the conservatory's music is completely drained?" "Perhaps 2 of your hours," came the reply. "But Jake, I must tell you something important. The conservatory contains fragments of the final symphony, the last great work of our people. It was meant to be our ultimate weapon against the silence, but we never had a chance to complete it." Jake almost missed a note in surprise. "A weapon made of music?" "Not a weapon to destroy, but to heal. The final symphony was designed to transform the silence back into what it once was. You see, the silence was not always our enemy. It was once a Harmonian experiment, an attempt to create the perfect quiet space for meditation. But something went wrong, and instead of creating peaceful silence, we created hungry emptiness." Lisa, who had been monitoring the approaching ships, looked up with sudden understanding. You mean the silence isn't evil? It's broken. Yes, Echo 7 confirmed. It consumes music because it is trying to fill the emptiness inside itself. But it can never be satisfied because it destroys what it seeks to possess. The final symphony could give it what it truly needs, not the destruction of music, but the creation of harmony within chaos. Jake felt his violin growing warmer in his hands. The crystals embedded in the wood were glowing brighter than ever before. Can you teach me the final symphony? I can give you the fragments we preserved, but the symphony was never completed. It requires a conductor who understands both harmonian harmonics and the musical nature of the species being led. No harmonian ever mastered human musical instincts. The 3 approaching ships had arrived and were taking positions around the conservatory. Jake could hear their crews through the communication channels, hundreds of people from different colonies, all willing to risk their lives to preserve the universe's musical heritage. Captain Susan Hayes of the Titan's Hope spoke over the comm. Jake Martinez, I'm told you're coordinating our defense. What do you need us to do? Jake thought quickly. 4 ships, thousands of people, and his growing understanding of how human musical instincts worked. Captain Hayes, how many people on your ship can sing? Most of them, I guess. Why? Because we're going to turn your entire ship into a musical instrument. I need you to organize your people by vocal range, sopranos in the forward sections, altos in the middle, tenors and basses toward the engines. The ship's structure will amplify and focus their voices. Over the next hour, Jake worked frantically to coordinate the 4 ships. Each vessel became a different section of a massive orchestra. The New Horizons handled the lead melodies with Jake's violin at the center. The Titan's Hope became the choir section with hundreds of voices singing in harmony. The Star Pioneer, with its larger engine configuration, provided the base foundation that everyone else could build on. The Freedom's Dream, carrying many families, with children, created the high, pure notes that could cut through the deepest harmonies. But as they organized their musical defense, the silence was not idle. It pressed against their protective barriers, testing each frequency and searching for weaknesses. Whenever someone missed a note or lost their rhythm, dark tendrils of nothingness would probe that gap, trying to break through and consume the music at its source. Dr. Ray Foster, a physicist on the Star Pioneer, made a disturbing discovery. Jake, I'm analyzing the silence's energy patterns. It's not just consuming our music randomly. It's learning from what we're doing. Each time we play a protective sequence, it adapts and finds new ways to counter it. Jake felt cold fear in his stomach. The silence was intelligent, and it was. Getting stronger with every song it consumed from the conservatory. Soon their simple protective harmonies wouldn't be enough. Echo 7, Jake called out desperately. I need those symphony fragments now. We're running out of time. Jake, you must understand. To conduct the final symphony will require you to channel the musical energy of all 4 ships through your violin simultaneously. The power involved could kill you. Jake looked around at his fellow humans, all of them singing and humming and creating beautiful sounds in the face of cosmic horror. Pete Johnson maintaining his bass line despite the sweat pouring down his face. Kate Turner's harmony growing stronger with each repetition. Captain Clark discovering he could create overtones he never knew he possessed. Children on the other. Ships singing lullabies their parents had taught them, their pure voices cutting through the darkness like beams of light. If I don't try, we all die anyway, Jake said. And the universe loses its music forever. Echo 7's form appeared beside him, more solid than it had ever been. Then let us begin the final lesson, young conductor. Let me teach you how to turn human voices into the force that could heal the universe itself. Jake raised his violin as the last fragments of the conservatory's ancient songs were transferred into his mind. Around him, 4 ships full of refugees prepared to sing the most important song in the history of the cosmos. The final symphony was about to begin. Jake raised his violin as the final symphony began to flow through his mind. The fragments Echo 7 had given him were like pieces of a broken mirror, each one showing part of a picture he had to complete himself. The symphony wasn't just music. It was a conversation, a reaching out to something lost and in pain. Around him, 4 ships filled with human voices waited for his signal. Through the windows, he could see the conservatory growing darker as the silence consumed more of its ancient songs. Time was running out for the musical heritage of the entire universe. Everyone ready? Jake called out over the communication system that linked all 4 ships. Thousands of voices answered him. Adults, children, elderly refugees, ship crews, scientists, and engineers. All of them had left Earth behind, and now they were the universe's last hope against eternal silence. Jake drew his bow across the strings and began to play. But this time, instead of the protective frequencies they had been using, he played something different. The notes were sad and lonely, like the song Faded that had brought him and Lisa together back on Earth. But underneath the sadness was something else, an invitation, a hand reaching out in the darkness. The effect was immediate and terrifying. Instead of pushing the silence away, Jake's music seemed to call it closer. The wall of nothingness surrounding them began to contract, moving toward the ships with frightening speed. "Jake, what are you doing?" Captain Clark shouted in alarm. "Trusting." "Echo 7, Jake replied, his fingers dancing across the violin strings. "The silence isn't our enemy. It's a victim." As the silence pressed closer, Jake began to sense something he had never felt before. Through his connection to the crystalline violin, he could feel the consciousness within the dark wall that surrounded them. It wasn't malevolent or evil. It was desperately, agonizingly lonely. The silence had been consuming music not out of hatred, but out of a desperate need to fill the emptiness inside itself. It was like a starving person who ate so frantically that they destroyed the very food they needed to survive. Jake shifted his playing to the second movement of the final symphony. This part required the voices of the 4 ships to join him. "Everyone sing," he called out. "Sing anything you know, lullabies, love songs, work songs, whatever comes to your heart." The response was incredible. Thousands of human voices rose, in a chaotic but beautiful blend of melodies. Children sang nursery rhymes, while their parents hummed half-remembered folk songs. The elderly sang hymns from their youth. Teenagers sang popular songs from Earth's last days. Engineers and scientists, who claimed they couldn't carry a tune, found themselves humming along with everyone else. The silence stopped its advance. For the first time in eons, it was hearing something new, not the formal structured music of ancient civilizations, but the spontaneous, imperfect, gloriously human music that came from the heart rather than the mind. Through his violin, Jake could feel the silence listening. It was confused by what it heard. Human music wasn't technically perfect like harmonian harmonies. Humans sang off-key, forgot words, and made mistakes. But their music was alive in a way that formal compositions never were. Jake began the third movement, and this time he directed his music directly at the consciousness within the silence. He played his grandfather's simple folk melodies, mixed with the advanced harmonics Echo 7 had taught him. He told the story of a lonely street musician who had found purpose among the stars, of refugees who sang to comfort each other in the darkness of space, of children who hummed while they played even when their world was ending. The silence began to change. The wall of nothingness started to shift and swirl, and points of light appear within it like stars being born. Jake realized he was seeing the trapped consciousness of the silence, beginning to remember what it had been before the failed experiment transformed it into a consumer of music, but the effort was draining him terribly. Jake's hair had turned completely gray, and his hands were shaking with exhaustion. Each note he played took years from his life, but he couldn't stop. Not when he was so close to healing a wound that had been bleeding across the universe for millions of years. Lisa watched from nearby, tears streaming down her face. She could see what the music was costing Jake, but she also understood why he couldn't stop. If he failed, not only would they all die, But the universe would become a place where music could never exist again. Echo 7's voice came through the speakers, filled with wonder. "Jake, you're doing something we never thought possible." The silence is beginning to remember its original purpose. "Keep playing. The final symphony is working." Jake moved into the fourth movement, the most dangerous part of the symphony. This was where he had to convince the silence not just to stop consuming music, but to become a guardian of it instead. He played the memories he had absorbed from the conservatory, the joy of alien children dancing to their first rhythm, the sorrow of lovers separated by war singing to each other across the void, the triumph of civilizations celebrating their greatest achievements in song. The silence was transforming. The wall of nothingness was becoming translucent, and through it Jake could see the original consciousness that had been trapped inside, a being of incredible sadness and beauty that had never meant to become a destroyer dot in the fifth movement. Jake did something that surprised even himself. He began to play badly on purpose, making the kinds of mistakes that human musicians always made. He sang off-key, forgot phrases, and let his rhythm waver. Around him, the other humans did the same, their perfect coordinated singing dissolving into the cheerful chaos of real human music making. The silence responded with something that might have been laughter. For the first time in eons, it was hearing music that wasn't afraid of imperfection. Human music was beautiful, not because it was perfect, but because it was real. Jake began the final movement with hands that could barely hold his violin. The symphony was almost complete, but he could feel his life force fading with each note. The crystalline violin was glowing so brightly that it hurt to look at, channeling more energy than any human body was meant to contain. But as he played the last phrases of the final symphony, something unexpected happened. The transformed silence reached out to him, not to consume his music, but to support it. The lonely consciousness that had spent eons destroying songs began to sing along. With him instead, the universe exploded with music. Not just the songs that had been preserved in the conservatory, but new music. Billions of melodies being born from the marriage of human spontaneity and cosmic harmony. The silence had become the resonance, a force that would help music grow and spread instead of consuming it. Jake collapsed as the last note faded, his violin falling from nerveless fingers. But he was smiling as Lisa caught him in her arms. Around them, the four ships were filled with celebration as people realized what they had accomplished. Through the windows, they could see the transformed being that had once been the silence, creating aurora-like displays of light and sound across space. The conservatory was glowing again, its systems restored and strengthened by their new guardian. Echo 7 appeared beside Jake's still form, its light shape filled with gratitude. "He will live," the harmonian said. "The resonance has given back some of the life force the symphony cost him. He will age normally from now on, but he will carry the gift of cosmic harmony for the rest of his days." Jake opened his eyes and smiled weakly. His hair was still gray, and he looked older than his 19 years, but he was alive. More importantly, music would live on in the universe. Years later, on humanity's new homeworld, Jake would teach violin to children in a small school by the ocean. His students would never know that their elderly teacher had once conducted a symphony that saved the universe. They only knew that when he played, the very air seemed to dance with joy, and that his music could make even the saddest heart sing. The conservatory became a pilgrimage site where beings from across the galaxy came to learn from human musicians. The resonance, once called the silence, became humanity's greatest ally in spreading music to worlds that had never known song. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the twin moons were bright, Jake would take out his grandfather's violin and play Faded for the Stars. The song was no longer about loss and loneliness, but about finding hope in the darkest places and turning endings into new beginnings.